Welcome back to the Wolff Den live in Arizona on location for the second day in a row. Today we welcome Mark Koesterer to the show. Welcome to the Wolff Den. Great to have you.
Matt, great to see you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, we're gonna have a great conversation around college athletics. But for the people in the audience who don't know who you are, give us a real quick rundown, and then we'll get into everything.
Perfect. Well, I was a student athlete in high school and college. Became a parent of five kids, four college athletes. So been involved with athletics from a personal standpoint for many years. For the past 15 years, I was an executive in a sports and entertainment company in Hollywood called Sports Studio, where we produced movies, TV shows, and commercials, but just the sports aspect. So I learned about branding, marketing, agencies. We represented the NFL, NBA, MLB, all the major sports leagues. And so really sold that company in June of 2021. And NIL, name, image, and likeness, which we'll expand upon, started in July. And I've created what I think is the premier education platform to guide student athletes and their families through their NIL journey.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the landscape first, and then we'll get into all the stuff that you guys are doing for it. For the people who don't know what NIL is, I guess give us, let them just give a quick intro for that too.
Yeah, so, as the name suggests, it's about the right to monetize, profit, and build a brand around your name, image, and likeness. So, in practical standpoint, prior to July 1st, 2021, the NCAA prohibited student athletes from signing autographs, doing social posts for money, making appearances, selling jerseys with their name on it. In other words, they felt that the amateurist part of NCAA athletics would be jeopardized if they allowed that. Through a number of legal fronts, that changed. And so now student athletes can profit from, monetize, and build personal brands around name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, on its surface, on paper, that sounds great. So the good news is athletes are going to have the ability to earn some money as they're playing because they can't just go get a job. They're able to earn some money. Colleges are making a ton of money on these athletes. I think we all can agree that's a good thing, right? I don't know if anyone's really arguing that that's not a good thing for the athletes. The other side is it got pushed through, and this is all my opinion. It got pushed through very fast. The rules are they're not really being enforced. The NCAA is in a rock and a hard place here because they can't enforce it too hard because they're the ones who were preventing everyone from getting all the money. So they're kind of just sitting on the sideline in the fashion that the NCAA does with all of their rules and regulations. And it was a very interesting piece last night by Scott Van Pelt on ESPN SportsCenter about NIL, talking about how it was the Wild Wild West, and there needs to be some more transparency around it, which I've always been talking about. And the one thing he talked about is that combined with the transfer portal has really made things messy right now. There's a lot of experts out there, and I would probably put you as an expert in NIL as well. But still, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. And part of it is the transparency is what actually is everyone getting? Most schools, from what I hear, are not even reporting. I mean, obviously there's some compliance and all that, but they're not putting it out there. We hear the numbers like right before we joined on, you were talking about, someone getting a couple $1 million into a collective, which, might not do much. My opinion, again, is that the top athletes are the ones that are going to really benefit from this. And that's such a small number. Could there be a way to figure out, stipends, people get paid, NIL, so the majority of athletes, and then we're talking about in all sports, not just football, get done. So that was a long-winded opinion of mine on the NIL. From where you're sitting, what are you seeing now today as we stand? 1 year later, essentially.
Yeah, so I think you made a couple of points which I'd like to address. I don't believe that the NCAA or the powers that be thought this through, right? I think they were forced from a litigation standpoint to back away, whether it be Title IX, whether it be the Ed O'Banion case, yada, yada, yada. And essentially, the NCAA said, all right, it's up to you, the states and local jurisdiction and the universities.
Which is terrible. That's a terrible idea for any law, because it's a really bad idea for any law when there's so much movement. And in NCAA, that's it. Like, hey, I can go to California, I can go to Florida. The other thing that you mentioned real quick, Ed O'Banion, they had so many years. I mean, that's 15 years ago, right? 20 years ago. They had so much time to do something, and they didn't.
Well, there's lots of fault, right? But the reality is no one foresaw NIL as we have sensationalized and talked about today in the news. I don't believe that they did, because if they did, they would have addressed it. But I want to separate two things because it's really important to what we do. And I'll say that it's the top 2% of the kids that go to Power 5 schools are involved with collectives, are involved with alumni donations, and are involved with transfer portal payments, okay? So that's the top 2%. No one foresaw NIL collectives and the transfer portal colliding in what we call now free agency with no salary cap in college, okay? So that's one section. But I believe, and I'm out fighting the good fight to make people aware, that NIL in its purest form was made for the 98% who don't attend those schools. It is for the kid that's on a partial scholarship. It is for the kid that is in a Division III athlete, male or female, that is on no athletic aid, that's on academic aid, that's on financial aid, to make $150 a month, $300 a month, $500 a month, not the $1 million that the stories are being sensationalized around. So in its purest form, NIL is an awesome opportunity. Now, the second part of that, in my opinion, is that what it's done is it's created an entrepreneurial environment. We now have a 500,000 student athlete think tank where kids can become entrepreneurs. They can become self-employed. They can do marketing and branding exercises. They can create career opportunities because they're learning about digital marketing, influencer, basic business concepts. And in this day and age of remote work, technology work, the anti-office mindset of student athletes today, it's a great opportunity to build life skills.
But I would, so again, to talk about, I'm not as concerned about the NIL portal action as I am the NIL recruiting, right? Because if you're in the portal, you've essentially established yourself a little bit, the value of it. And again, we don't know what any of this money is anyway. I'd argue to say it's probably not, whatever people are saying, it's not as much, at least on paper. And there's still probably, while now you're just allowing payments, it's all that other stuff is, the bags and all that are still probably going on as well.
Well, here, but let me just say that here's how the portal does affect it. So I just saw an interview with Coach Stoops at the University of Kentucky football player. I think it's Mark Stoops. There's a couple of Stoops brothers. Yeah. And he had one of the top recruiting classes in the country last year. And 8 of them came in and played right away this year at Kentucky. They've had a fantastic season fighting in the SEC, a non-traditional football school. He now has to re-recruit those kids to keep them enrolled at Kentucky because they're going to be poached by other schools. So there's where the transfer portal, recruiting, and the enticement of NIL money to pull these kids from Kentucky, a non-traditional football school, that's where it does collide.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm a fan of it. I'm just saying that to me makes a little bit more sense than the NIL that's being thrown out there for a recruit, who's like Arch Manning, who's never played. That's just what I say. I think look, there's got to be a way. There's enough. The thing for me for almost everything we talked about is there's just enough money for everyone. So why don't we figure out a way to do it that makes sense so it's fair for everyone, right? I always talk about a win-win-win-win, and that's just, there's no, if the NCAA, they could find a way. There is a way to do it where it's very transparent, it's very fair and equal, and we know exactly what's going on. Who does that favor, though?
Favors the people with money.
No, even if it's fair, I don't even know if it favors them. They're fine with how it is now because there's so many others who can't compete with them.
Well, I think in a perfect world that would happen, and we may get to that. We may get these guardrails put in place. I don't know what they will be, and I don't know when they will come. but clearly it's out of control right now. I agree with you.
Well, I think it's, I mean, something either bad is going to have to happen or like, nefarious or maybe legal action. That would be my guess on how it's going to get all put together. Well, let's talk about education because that's where you guys come in. And whether it's education through you guys or just education to the average person who really doesn't know, even the experts who don't really know and they're speculating. And it's not just NIL, it's all other kinds of stuff, which ties in a little bit. We don't know. We don't really know what is going on and what's good and what's not. And you're skirting the line, it's black and it's white. But what you guys aim to do, and what every school I think is trying to do, is to educate the people who work there and the people around them as to what NIL is, how they can use it, what they should be doing, what they should be thinking about. And that's where you guys come in. So talk a little bit about the players on NIL and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we believe that whether you're a Power Five collective kid, or you're Division III non-scholarship, non-revenue sport athlete, the opportunity is the same, and that is to increase your brand, to create value, to create opportunities for post-career. And so those 5 principles that I have outlined, we call the 5 pillars, address that. And quickly, it's digital marketing, and it's not taking pictures of your friends on Saturday night and post them on Instagram, right? That's not building a brand. That's just friends and family. But how do you create an audience? How do you tell a story? How do you expand your envelope beyond your initial circle of friends and family? The second is, how do you leverage that with a brand? Because what we're seeing in advertising now, and you can just look at the announcement the other day from Dunkin' Donuts, for instance, that's contracted with 24 college athletes around the country to promote the Dunkin' brand. Brands now are realizing that athletes are influencers, and they're influencers in markets that they're very interested in. The brands are. So second pillar is influencer relationship. Third one is just a basic concept course on tax, legal, and finance. So you want to talk about the smoking time bomb, wait till April 15th, 2023, when these kids that got $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 and didn't pay any taxes because they were 1099, and now they're going to be held accountable by the IRS, who doesn't care whether they can run fast or not. And more importantly, someone mentioned to me the other day, and it's very possible, some of these kids that are going to get several tens of thousands of dollars through collectives and NIL opportunities and are not paying attention to the tax liability, they're going to graduate from college with the tax liability. They're going to actually leave college in debt, okay? And that would be a really bad thing. So that's pillar 3. Pillar 4 is community service and philanthropy. A great way to give back. Look, we're all benefiting from athletics. My life, your life is better because of our association with athletics. We need to give back and be appreciative. We also need to help build a balance in life, that it's not all about sports. There are other things that can build your personal life and your future. And then the 5th one is probably the most commonly thought important pillar, is financial literacy. If you're a Division III kid, and if you're smart with your money and you graduate from college and you've reduced your debt, or, God forbid, you have $5,000 or $10,000 in the bank at age 22, how do you leverage that to change your options going forward and to improve your future? So those are the 5 pillars.
Well, the interesting thing about the Dunkin' is part of it. I mean, you could pay anyone to push your brand. I feel like that shouldn't be. I mean, that really opens things up for anyone to get paid for anything, for any amount, because they haven't. It's supposed to be what's a fair amount, and then where do you get that? What's that fair amount, right?
Yeah, well, again, as you said, there aren't enough guardrails in this right now. We don't even know with the collectives what is a reasonable exchange of money and activities. Is it once a month you go and sign autographs at the local Boys and Girls Club and you get $10,000 a month? Is it 3 posts a week? There's no established credentials for what is fair pay for play.
Yeah, I think there was a rush to put stuff out there to try and make money grabs. So these kids were putting out terrible T-shirts, right, and all this, the NFT stuff that didn't really, it wasn't work. There was no reason for people to buy it. And then everyone, the same with anything, everyone trying to grab attention from them and be a part of it. That's another thing. It's almost like, what you guys are doing is for the NFL rookie symposiums or any major league rookie symposium to really teach them, what's around the people, what you should be doing, what you need to look out for. And look, at the end of the day, it's up to them to either want to abide by it or worry about that stuff or not. But they should have that education. That should be a required thing, not just, oh, well, let me sit there. And it ruins people's lives who don't pay attention to this stuff. That's right. The help is right there in front of them. And they either blow it off or they think they're above it, whatever reason that might be. So as you're going, what is a reason for people not to want to get educated about this? What are you seeing out there?
Well, I think we've come to use the phrase that people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so because Scott Van Pelt and ESPN and every large major sports media company has sensationalized the big deal and the yet to be determined, average pay for Power 5 schools, there are many people that just feel like it's not for them. My kid isn't going to play at Alabama or Kentucky or at Ohio State. My kid is not a Power 5 athlete. It's not for us. Or my kid doesn't really know anything about digital marketing, so they will never participate in NIL. And so it's educating people about what it is, and that's what this conversation is. It's educating people that there is an NIL deal out there for everyone. It may be different, and that NIL is for all. And so that's part of our challenge right now, is to educate people on exactly why they need our education, and then to deliver the education to give them the skill set.
And the schools in my eyes are still not really playing as nice. They know they have to do it, but they're not playing as nice. I want to give you two examples of this. The first one is the jersey sales. I mean, the amount of money that these players are getting on the jersey sales is laughable. Why don't they just create their own jersey? But here's the problem. We tried to do an NIL, like a trading card for a player, and we went and did this stuff and went to get approval. And they're like, well, you got to remove this. You got to remove that. You got to remove this. I'm like, dude, everyone knows it doesn't matter. It's the team colors. Like, it's fine. It doesn't have your logo on it. It doesn't have your mascot. It doesn't have your marks, but they still wouldn't allow it. So now you're limiting them to what they can do. And when they do it, how much are you going to get on? Because you have your name, image, and likeness, but you don't have the permission to use the school which you play on, which to me seems ridiculous if you're signed on with them, right? It's like, remember back in the day we used to see like Jordan in the commercials with the red and black jersey that it didn't say Bulls on it because that's the Players Association versus the NBA. Like, how ridiculous is that they all can't play nice in the sandbox, and who loses out on that?
Well, this is actually an area where I am fairly well versed because I worked in licensing in Hollywood for the last 15 years. And so I understand licensing of marks very well. And in professional sports, there are sponsorship agreements between brands and professional leagues, and therefore they control the ability to use those marks in a particular advertising category. There are some local brands that have local deals with teams. But in this college situation, Matt, I think this is something that isn't being talked about, but I believe it's going to be an issue. So right now, most of the colleges use a third party to manage their licensing rights. So that would be the CLC, could be Learfield, could be IMG, selling banners in the stadium, selling advertising on the scoreboard, selling, whatever marks that they can. And so you have this conflict because those third parties are managing those rights and paying the schools and taking a fee, right? So the problem is if an athlete all of a sudden wants to use the school marks in an NIL deal that he or she's getting paid for, the third party company isn't involved with that. And so the licensing rights don't allow the student athlete to use those marks. But here's the catch. Why would a school not want their marks to be put out there with a student athlete, right?
Well, they're not getting paid on it.
Well, so how is that going to get figured out? But that's something that I think we're headed to a collision course with student athletes owning the right to use the marks and also using the rights to use the video, which is another whole conversation of can they use their highlights on their own Instagram
Oh my God.
without compensation?
I just had a conversation with a professional team who said they had to pay money for rights to using an image that they took because it's owned. I guess Major League Baseball owns it, and they had a deal with a third party who manages it. So now the Major League has to get a piece of anything that has that on it, and this third party has to get a. I mean, it's ridiculous. There was, I forget who it was, the Kardashians or someone. Maybe it was Rihanna. They couldn't post a picture that they took themselves. They weren't able to post it. I get, look, people need to get paid for their work, but we got to find a way that just makes it common sense. We got to bring common sense into the equation, not only for this, for everything. There's so much stuff that just makes no sense. And it's just, I think we need to bring common sense a little bit more into that. I think it all still does boil down to transparency. I think part of them, they don't want you to know what they paid this recruit to go, because then the next recruit's going to want that, right? When you have in professionals, like, we know, hey, this is what this person got, and that's now the benchmark. And by the way, the benchmark never goes down; it only goes up. So it's going to get crazy. And then next thing you know, Judge gets 40 mil a year, and
I was going to say, ask Aaron Judge about it. Always goes up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, close. I mean, the others are making 42, but that's fine. He'll be fine. I think he's going to be okay.
I think he'll do all right. And you know what? It's a great story. He bet on himself, 213.5 million versus 360. It's a big difference.
I bet. Look, I tell you, this is the other thing that they don't do, and it could be in college too. Is bet on yourself, man. Let's bet on yourself instead of jumping. It would make it better for you, but it's better for the teams. That's maybe more a portal and an NFL draft issue. But man, I bet on myself every day. I am betting on myself right now, and I have no doubt that it's gonna pay off. And I think these people who are betting on themselves, maybe not take an NIL deal until you've established yourself, and then get better, right? Because once you have some sort of deal, you are limiting yourself to what others are going to pay you for.
Well, again, it goes back to pillar 3 for us, which is tax, legal, and compliance. So, who's looking at the contract? What does the contract allow? Does the contract allow for an escalator clause if your audience grows? Or, is it a 1-year deal? Is it a lifetime rights deal? I heard stories in year 1 of kids, signing for $250, $500 that gave away their lifetime rights in a particular category, say it was technology, software, or something like that, right? And so if they blow up, if they bet on themselves, now they've limited themselves. So again, some basic understanding of contract details would go a long ways.
Yeah, one of the issues, I think, and it's very similar to the NFT world, the people who are most invested in NIL are the ones who are the loudest, who, again, they know stuff, right? They might know more than everyone else, but there is still this unknown. There's still the unknown. And so that's also, it's just people believe what they hear, and we don't know what's true and what's not true. And then even from a rules and regulations perspective, which, because you have all this stuff and it's a large document and it's written in lawyer speak, and it's still even very vague, right? If you want to argue it, but no one's enforcing it. So that's really the big issue. The good thing about what you guys are doing is you're just trying to educate, and you're going to, as the stuff gets evolved, you're going to have more to educate people, and you don't care if someone gets this or that. That's not what you guys are in it for.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, what are we, 16, 17 months into this right now? And I'm not, probably as intimately involved in some of this as some others, but I've still yet to see a collective athlete contract. I've heard the details, or, the highlights of the money or the payment requirements and the opportunity, but I haven't seen a contract yet. So I don't know, what these contracts look like. Someone can throw out a number and say the kid's going to get $30,000. Well, is that 1 year? Is that all 4 years? Does he have to start? What if he, doesn't qualify academically? Like, what are the details?
Goes to the NFL, all that.
Right. Yeah. So It's kind of like the NFL contracts, right? It's not about the top dollar; it's about the guaranteed money, I guess.
Yeah, or what does that mean? These people throw. I mean, to them, they're throwing money at. It doesn't matter to them. So that's the other thing. Like you throw $30,000 to this athlete. First of all, it's through their business, right? Most of it's not their personal thing. If these businesses are, or even through the collective. But I know firsthand from big donors at Power Five school that there are some of them who want no business with they don't want to put any money towards these athletes. They'll put the money towards the facilities, towards the program, but they don't want it going to players. But on the other side, you think there's people who have a lot of money who would be like, hell, I want my school to do well. Let's throw some money at them. And to them, throwing a couple $1,000,000 to a program, it's really no big deal to them. So I think, even and from all different types of schools, you got players who in all sports. We don't have to just talk about football who've done well, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another, interesting fight that's going to happen is, schools used to a certain amount of revenue every year from donors, and all of a sudden some portion of that goes towards a collective. The school then is out that money. How do they recoup that?
I mean, Aaron Judge played in college, Fresno State, I believe. I mean, why can't he just throw 10 million for the Bulldogs and get some baseball players? And they have a good program anyway, obviously, but I think eventually you might see that.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's probably happening right now. It's just not publicized.
Yeah. So how do they get away with not publicizing it?
Well, I'm not a tax or legal expert, but I'm guessing Fresno State has some reporting at some point because it's a state school, right?
Yeah.
Where USC is a private school, for instance, they may not have to disclose all of their donors and the amount. It's kind of like campaign contributions kind of thing, right? So I'm guessing that over time it'll come out, but it doesn't. There doesn't seem to be transparency, to use your word, in any of that right now.
What if you had to take a guess? How long until this thing settles down and becomes what it should be and what most people are comfortable with?
I think year one was the Wild West, which was last academic year, and everyone was just throwing money at things and trying to make things happen. I think we're in the middle of year two, right halfway through this academic year, the end of football season, essentially. And people are starting to get smarter about their money and what they do. And you can read the stories about return on investment from the head of the University of Miami collective, Ruiz, trying to second guess whether some of those deals were good. So that'll be year two, is a little bit. And at the end of year three, I think we will find out, who really are players and who really are imposters.
Oh, there we go.
All
You
right.
there?
Okay. I'm here.
Right.
So I think we cut off with, year one was crazy. Year two, we're trying to, be a little bit more business minded. Year three, I think we're going to find out who the posers are and who the players are. So 3 years is the answer.
And do you think it's going to benefit the top football schools more, or do you think eventually other schools and other sports are going to be able to find a way to really benefit their program and the athletes?
Well, I think it's a little of both. I think it is going to create a spread between the haves and the have-nots. I think, there's been a lot of talk about a power conference of Power Five schools that could be, anywhere from 40 to 60 schools. I think that's probably realistic. But I do believe that there's still a lot of kids out there that want to play sports in college, and there's only so many spots on each team. So there is a finite number of positions. And so the mid-majors, if you will, are going to have to find their way. They're not going to compete with the Power Five schools. But there's still going to be, great opportunities for kids to go to college, to get an education, to do all the things that we profess, and as to use athletics to better their lives. And I still believe in college athletics long-term as a great, great way for kids to build a life.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a business for a while, even just on the sports side, and the business has taken away a little bit from it. I mean, NIL, even before NIL, you start as a college fan, you start to watch, and I always love college athletics way more than I like professional athletics. I could see it waning a little bit, depending. I'm in favor of expanding the playoff. March Madness will always be the best, weekend in sports. But the business is booming, and it's money. And anytime you're talking about a lot of money, there's just stuff that is going to be there that you don't like, and there's going to be people who are going to try and take advantage of it. And I think this is no different. So that's why I think it's important to rein it in. And I think the good thing is that they'll be able to rein it. A lot of times you do something and it's out of control and you've lost control forever. There's not a whole lot you can do. The good thing with NIL, it feels as though there will be the ability to rein it in and to really, the dust will settle and life will move on. I mean, it'll be one of those things where the people will be like, man, if I was playing in that era, it would have been great. Right. And even the people playing now, like, hey, I was a couple years too early. Missed out on it.
Well, I think the engine behind all of it, okay, is the media rights, right? That's what's paying for all of this. And just when you think it can't get any bigger, the media rights deals get bigger. Look at the Big 12. The Big 10's media rights package coming up, right? 90 million per school. It's an unbelievable amount of money. And that's what's driving, regional sports networks. That's what's driving Major League Baseball, because they have 162 games. And so the media rights is the money part of it. And just when you think it may go away, we look at Thanksgiving weekend. I believe that the Dallas Cowboy-New York Giants game was one of the highest regular season NFL games ever. You had a World Cup game that was the highest outside of Europe ever. You had a collegiate football game that was the highest rated collegiate football game ever, all within 3 days. So people are still consuming sports.
Why can't a player say, you don't have permission to film me without paying me?
Well, my opinion has been that the reason that the NCAA gave up the NIL control is because of that exact reason. They are afraid of collective bargaining. They are afraid of unionization. And I think Sean Clifford, the quarterback at Penn State, teased a little bit in the preseason about collectively creating a pool of Big Ten players that say, hey, we want a piece of the media rights deal. There'll be lawyers that'll take on a class action suit, but the NCAA, at least intermediately, has stopped that because they are paying the players or giving the players the right to make money. But media rights is so big, there'll be lawyers that try and get a piece of it. I think you're right.
They're broadcasting the game, and how are they doing it? They're not putting helmets up there. They're putting this player versus this player, and these are the highlights. I mean, that's what I feel like it's just that's something that people should be able to do. Hey, I don't want to play in this game until throw me some money, and that's why they should get part of it. It should be, I'd rather them get a stipend and get a bonus, maybe performance bonus, maybe, or ability. That might have been a better way to do it, to say, hey, you can pay your players X amount of dollars. And look, these college athletes, they get a free education, which now is we had a conversation with my friends. They're like, it's going to be $50,000 a year just to go to school, right? That's pretty good. You get room and board and food and all kinds of clothing and apparel and so and this isn't an argument against allowing. It's just to say a lot of athletes are treated well.
I agree. I've always felt that one of the ways that they should share the money is a little bit more long term. And I may be a little bit old school in this, but I would like to see athletes get a stipend based on their academic progress, right? So you complete year 1, 2, 3, 4, you graduate, there's graduated money, and maybe they get a bonus when they graduate. Maybe they get 5 or 10 years of medical insurance when they graduate from college, right? That would be a huge thing. But people want money up front. They want cash. They don't value some of these other things like education or medical benefits. And that's just the way the world is right now.
The majority of athletes who are able to earn the money need it. They need it now. They're not, they don't. That's why you had to see these interesting situations where a player comes from money. I'll stay another year in college, or I don't need the scholarship there, or if they want to help out the school, there's just ways of doing it for the schools that don't. So I get that, but I also get that they could have. It could be better to just set them. There's good ways to do it. I don't have the answers on that. I just know there's better. I don't think anyone would argue that there's not better ways to do whatever they're doing. With the players NIL, what does the program look like?
So we have built an online education platform. So it's self-learning, self-paced. The 5 pillars are each about 60 minutes worth of content. We've contracted with some of the leading NIL thought leaders in the industry to create this content. It's dynamic. We have cartoons, we have games, we have video interaction, we have work projects. So we try to make it fun and interesting. So it's about 5 hours of content, which you can download or you can take 10 minutes at a time. There are 2 to 4 minute sections, all involved with the 5 pillars of education.
And do you have access to that to rewatch it, or?
Absolutely, yeah. Once you pay for and subscribe, you have unlimited access to that. You can go back and forth as much as you'd like.
How you guys have been doing this? You launched a year ago?
Well, we started the thought process a year ago, which is when you and I met, but we actually launched the curriculum this past August. So we're less than 4 months old.
And the success of talk about the success of it and where you think the next year is going to bring you.
Well, I think we're a direct to consumer brand, so we actually market to student athletes and their families. Starting at age 16 is the window that we suggest. Juniors in high school. We've had several hundred kids go through the program right now. We've got an affiliation with Johns Hopkins University. Their men's and women's lacrosse team is taking it. There's 73 athletes in that program. So again, we're educating people about what NIL is. We're educating people about what NIL education can do for them. And then we're selling the class. So it's a couple of steps involved. But, I think as NIL gets younger, we're going to do a bigger business in high school than we thought. That seems to be the trend of the industry right now. And so I think, most of the kids that are organically creating NIL brands today started in high school. And that's something that people are learning. You don't just flip a switch the day you walk on campus as a freshman and become an NIL entrepreneur. You have to actually build a brand and start telling your story way before that.
Can the schools, can the athletic departments pay for their athletes to get this training, or is that not legal?
No, absolutely. In fact, in the NIL, in the NCAA letter of recommendation in this past month in November, one of the bullet points that they support was school-sponsored education for NIL athletes.
And are some schools doing this without outside of what you're doing? Or are they just, they have an NIL, they've hired NIL staff, compliance and all that. A lot of that's more to cover their ass, right? To make sure they don't get in trouble, because there could be a big a problem. How much trouble do you think these schools have to worry about with students who aren't, maybe kids who want to do something, but they're not, it's not going to be as, who wants to do paperwork and all this stuff? I remember my friend never used to file his receipts for his work trips. He got fired for it. Months and months, he just had people didn't want to do it. Is that an issue with schools with these these athletes who are just kind of going to go rogue?
Yeah, so there are, I think, less than 30 NIL coordinators on campuses in the country right now, which is an amazingly low number to me.
Yeah.
And so the other part of that would be compliance office. And there's always been compliance offices in colleges when it comes to recruiting and when it comes to, academics, all of these things that have been in place for years. But now the compliance officers have to understand the ins and outs of NIL. And I think that for sure, schools are afraid of having some type of a compliance issue, having some type of NCAA issue. And one of the ways that they do that is there are technology companies out there now where kids can register their NIL deals and it gets reported. Whether that's being done or not is a good point. I think the most recent data that I saw is that less than half of the kids in Power 5 schools were enrolled in compliance software. So what are the other half doing? I'm not sure.
I mean, the officers and the NIL corners, they could benefit from watching your training as well. I mean, it's ever evolving, but it's never too early to start to understand this. If you have an athlete who you think eventually is going to start to get recruited, on the flip side, you can commit when you're 14 years old and flip, 2 months before signing day. If someone else swoops in, it's almost like, let's see what's going on. Let me hear the rumors. And then, all right, we'll offer you this and this. I don't like the free agency part of it. I think, all right, look, at the end of the day, we don't even know. I'm almost against my school paying all this money because I think you can get plenty of athletes and good players and win without doing it. So it just feels a little wrong to me, depending on today. Maybe we see these rules change and my opinion changes, but I don't get worked up about who's paying who. That's fine.
Yeah.
Plenty of high paid people who didn't do so. Didn't the DJ from Clemson get a big NIL deal?
Yeah, and he just entered the transfer portal too.
Yeah, and so that JT Daniels, who was a high recruit, he's about to go on his 8th school, I think, in the portal.
Well, I think in the early days, like the beginning in July of 21, the quarterback at Oklahoma was thought to be Spencer Ratcliffe, right? And the big story was his big NIL deal.
Yeah, Rattler.
Rattler, yeah. And so one of the details which apparently came out afterwards was that, in order to get paid, he had to start so many games, and he did not. He got benched last year and subsequently transferred to South Carolina. But, pay for play is certainly not allowed, but we wink, wink, nod, nod. We know it's out there.
I mean, it's really all pay for play in a sense. You're just going to find a way that it's okay. It's not so apparent. Everything's going to be paid. You're paying these guys to play. What else are you paying them for? You're paying them for their performance on the field. And that's why you're paying them to pay. That's why Dunkin' Donuts is paying these athletes money. And that's not a great example. They might just be paying because they want to be involved and help. But at the higher level, when you talk about the players who are doing well, you're paying them for their performance on the field. So it kind of seems disingenuous to say you can't pay for that, but let's just find the right way to construct the rules and regulations so they can be enforced. But enforcement of this it's big money too, and nobody who wants that, they don't want to pay for it. It's not free. Right. The enforcement. It's not an easy thing either because think about, especially in football, there's 50, 80 players on a team. We had an incident in University of Florida. Where a player got in trouble for some, illegal material on his phone. Like, what's a coach? How's a coach going to stop that? I mean, at some point, it's got to be on the player. So education on the NIL, but education on just in general, like, hey, this is what you need to do to be a college athlete. Again, most of it's common sense. You don't need to have training to tell you don't have child porn on your phone, right?
No. Well, Matt, we're both old enough to know that common sense doesn't always win out, right? We've seen enough examples.
I always hope that common sense prevails in a lot of things. And as I've grown older, I've understood that it doesn't. Like, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, right? It doesn't matter what's fair. We were doing I forget where we were, and maybe I was playing with my one of my nieces, and she kept using the word "that's not fair." And I think my sister was like, "Look, life is not fair sometimes. That's just the reality we live in." And yeah, I don't know. I don't know the NIL needs to be fair. I just think by the definition of it and what it intends to be, it's not going to be fair just across the board equally, right? Bigger schools, smaller schools, men, women, whatever, however you want to slice it. But you want to get as close to that line as you can get.
Right. Right. Well, there's always going to be separation, haves and have-nots. I mean, look at the facilities race, the arms race in facilities for the last 20 years. Look at some of these programs with indoor facilities and the weight training and the nutrition stands and the staff, the number of support staff in these Power 5 football programs now. That's way different than the mid-majors. And I won't call out any mid-majors, but we know who they are. They just don't have those resources.
I feel like they should. And maybe that's why they're jumping to these bigger conferences, and all of a sudden you get a school, gets $5-10 million in sharing in a revenue share, which is, but in major leagues and even like these small markets have managed to do okay with not a lot of money. I don't know. I think we don't want because as it is, you got these schools who have been making a lot of money. Like Texas, for example, is always at the top of schools in revenue. There's not a whole lot of schools that make a lot of money on athletics, but Texas is one of them, and they've done okay. They haven't blown the doors off of, right? You see the schools like Alabama and Ohio State; those are always high up. But there are schools that can compete that don't need all the money. And so I don't want to see college athletics just be, hey, who's the highest bidder for this?
Well, I think that's why some people this year are behind TCU. No offense to TCU, but I don't think they're have the athletic budget of Texas, for instance, or Ohio State, but they're competing. So good for them, right?
I'd love to see them win. I would love to see them win it all. I was in Vegas last week. I threw a couple bucks on them to win it all. Just to have this was before they were announced. I think their odds are I got worse odds because they were expected to win the game. So I would have had better odds today.
Yeah.
But it's interesting too, even if a TCU, wanted to pay a quarter, football is a tough sport in that respect. You got to pay a lot of players to get enough player. Like basketball is maybe a little bit different because you might have one person who could remember, Carmelo Anthony brought Syracuse to a title. It's a lot easier to do one player, and that could really change your season. The only other thing I think could do it is college softball, which I think we haven't heard a lot of, but that I think will eventually show. Right? You get a pitcher, you only need one pitcher, you can win. It doesn't matter who else is out there. I mean, it does, but that college pitcher, I think that and the college quarterback are the two most influential players in college athletics.
Yeah, softball for sure. Yeah, because they can pitch every day or every other day or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, and then you got to find the school that cares enough about it. Like Alabama, Oklahoma are doing real well in softball, but I still don't think they're going to throw a lot of money at it. And now they also might think I don't have to, but the other teams that haven't yet, they might, and that might level the playing field. I always like to see new blood, and I don't know. Are you a fan of dynasties and just the same teams, or do you want to see new? I guess if it's your team, but I'm saying if it's not your team, or maybe if you don't even have a team.
Yeah, I like parity, but I respect dynasties. I think I said on a podcast last week that whether you like it or not, Bill Belichick's done an amazing job with the Patriots in the NFL, which it actually is predetermined to be mediocre, right? They want you to be 500 with the way the draft works and the way the salary cap works and everything. So you have to admire what Tom Brady's done, what the Patriots have done. you have to admire what the Lakers have done for the last 40 years, all those championships. So, but do I like new teams and new players? Absolutely. I love competition. I love college athletics. So that's why.
Yeah, I respect the dynasty, but you talk about like a basketball or a hockey or even NFL, you still got 14 teams in there, and you got to beat out 7 or 8 on your side. What I didn't like about the playoffs is you're just going to have the four. I don't know that these teams are any better than the others. There's unbalanced schedules even within the conferences. I think the SEC is a better conference than everyone else, but I still don't know that. We're all beating up on each other, and they win. So I think without a measure, it's hard to do. Are you excited for the expansion? I think 12. I don't think you can give a bye to any team in college again because it's so subjective. There's no measure for it. I think 8 teams is good. I think we need more than 4. Give division winners. It's weird in such a small group that you can have you couldn't win your conference, but you won the championship out of 4 teams. That to me seems weird.
Yeah, I'm for expansion because I like more competition. And I think the way I saw it set up is that some of those first round games are going to be at the school's home site, which is great for their fans, right? And the top 4 get a bye. But I'm old enough to have watched the NCAA basketball tournament. You mentioned March Madness go from 16 to I don't even know what the number is now. And there's always going to be an argument on the bubble teams, right? It's just always going to be. Go back to Major League Baseball. Now we have wild card games. There's still going to be arguments about who should get in, who shouldn't, who had the better season. But when it's subjective, I think more is better, and I think college football is subjective. And to your point about the SEC being the best, that may be true historically, but there are 2 Big Ten teams in the Final Four this year, and it'll be a chance for the Big Ten to put their stamp on this season.
Yeah, I know it's so hard. These teams are ranked so high, and this is just me being a fan. Like I don't. Who did they beat? Who did Ohio State beat this year that was any good? I think they're a good team. But that's why I think we need to expand. Like, I think they're really good. I also think the teams they played are even Penn State in the Rose Bowl. To me, I think the Rose Bowl, I know their tradition, they want to have a Big Ten team in. I mean, Penn State has no business being in the Rose Bowl in my eyes. I think they should pick another team. But it's so hard to say. And then you also don't know if just because you beat them on the field, does that mean that they're better? Right? Do we play 10 times? You could beat them. It's hard to beat someone a second. I mean, there's so many different obstacles for it. I'm excited for the expansion of it. I think for me, allowing 5, 6, 7, 8 to say I have a shot at the national championship. The bubble in the tournament, that's just good sports talk radio. Like, no one thinks these teams are going to win the championship, so we don't really feel like they're getting slighted at it. So that's why I think it's not a fair analogy, but it'll be fun. College sports, man. I would, if I never to watch a pro game and I can only watch college, that's what I would do.
I have a son that's in college athletics, and at the time he was working at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC, when they beat number 1 Virginia in the first round of the NCAA tournament a couple of years ago. That was pretty exciting.
I was so I'm all for a 16 beating a 1, but I really liked Virginia and Bennett. So I was not happy that I wanted them to win it all that year. I was not happy that they were the ones to lose. Like, there's so many other 1 seeds in that I would have loved to be like, yes, knock them out. I did not want them to lose. I was glad they won the championship the year after because it's a team I like to root for. Where did you play sports school?
I played college football at a small school in Michigan called Hillsdale College.
Yeah, and so I had a question because we have a kid from my high school who went out and took a preferred walk-on for UCLA. I guess if you could go back, would you go and play at that small school again, or would you like to sit if you knew you had to sit on the bench and most likely you're not going to play at like a big school to travel around, like a Power 5?
Well, I actually was given that opportunity. I wanted to go to Penn State, but I just wasn't good enough. And the coaching staff at Penn State said, go to community college and we'll take a look at you. And I decided to take my full scholarship. And I started as a freshman and played all 4 years. And I wouldn't trade that. There are people that would like the glory of being a walk-on or preferred walk-on or eventually getting a scholarship and making the travel team. All those things are exciting. But for me, it was more about playing right away. And I knew my limitations. So I'm happy with my decision, but I understand the kids want to play in those big schools, and that's why they make those other decisions.
Yeah, it'd be a tough I'd like to think I would probably play, just because, but I see both sides of it, and you never know. I mean, you get somewhere if you're good enough to be a walk on, you're playing in practice every day, and I improved a ton in just a span of a year, 2 years. So who knows? You just never know if you get on there. But either way, and now with the transfer portal, you can just come and go, as you please. So it doesn't even matter. You start wherever you want. You know,
Right.
I'm curious what percentage of athletes actually stay at the school. It's
Less and less.
yeah, less and less all the time. If you were a college athlete today, what's a cool NIL deal that you would want to do for yourself?
Uh, that's a good question. You know, I think I would want to do something in the food business, right? I'm a foodie, and I would want to do like a food show and get paid by brands to go around and taste test and to tell stories about how food gets made and things like that.
Yeah,
That would probably be my jam today.
do that today. I'd like to have people pay me to travel and eat at all these different great restaurants. I know that they're doing it.
Right.
I don't have the popularity yet. If you could pick a school in any sport in any position today, what would you do? What would you want? Where would you go? What would you play?
Wow, that's a really so. Who's the most popular athlete every year? You know, it's probably the quarterback at Ohio State or the quarterback at Alabama, right? Those are probably the most prestigious positions. You said that the quarterback is one of the most important positions there. Um, you know, I think to
But if you're a
play
top
as
recruit and you go to a smaller school and you're a quarterback, you can make some noise.
oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously the draft is not an exact science. Look at
Yeah,
Mr. Irrelevant that won a game for the 49ers last
great
weekend, you
story,
know?
isn't it?
Yeah. So I think, you know, there's all kinds of ways. It depends on what your interest is, but I just love being part of college athletics as an athlete, as a parent, and as a fan, as a father of a college coach now. I love to hear the bands. I love to hear the fans. I love to see and smell, you know, what game day looks like and feels like and tastes like. And I just love it all.
Where's uh where's the best college environment game that you've been to?
Well, I was at Notre Dame for the Reggie Bush push game. That was pretty amazing. I was at Penn State this year for Penn State, Ohio State. Penn State has an amazing tailgate arrangement, right? I have been to a Syracuse basketball game in its heyday. I lived in Syracuse when Syracuse played Georgetown in front of 35,000. That was an amazing indoor basketball experience. I have not been to an SEC game. I'd love to go to Alabama, Auburn. I'd love to go to an LSU game. I have not
LSU.
been to the biggest cocktail party is what Florida
Yeah,
State
Georgia.
or
Come on down.
Florida, Georgia. Yeah. So
I
there's
was at
lots left on my bullet.
I was at the Rack, which is now Vivian Stringer court. It's a great place.
Rutgers.
I mean, there's so many great places that aren't the biggest schools that you've been to watch college basketball, even football too. All the different traditions.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite college football? I know a cool story is that Everclear just went to Wisconsin for the first time in 25 years and experienced the jump around. I think that's the best and cool that I've ever been to. The Tom Petty for Florida, great. That's probably a top 5 college thing these days now. And South Carolina, when they play Sandstorm Darude at the beginning, it's nuts. I mean, it's like nothing I've ever seen. Do you have a tradition that sticks out that you think is, maybe top 5 college tradition?
Yeah, I'd say, you know, the Virginia Tech Sandman's pretty good.
Sandman. Yeah.
Yeah. You
These
know,
college,
and look, I'm old enough again, you know, when there was only a few schools on television, but you go to the big house in Michigan and hear them play, you know, Hail to the Victors, it gives you goosebumps.
yeah, anytime you get this song play, even like Rocky Top, I hate the song, but it's like catchy. It's kind of cool when you listen to it. Been to the big house. I was not as impressed with the crowd, but when you hear that song, when you hear Notre Dame's song, right,
Yeah.
it definitely gets you going. Tim Tebow, my answer, who would probably benefit the most from NIL? in the past. Any other names come to mind that you think would have been like?
Yeah, I think Reggie Bush, right?
Yeah,
Because he was so dynamic. He played in Los Angeles. He
he
was so
got
beloved.
the NIL.
Yeah, he got it. Well, he didn't, but Tebow's a great answer. There's been so many iconic athletes. Pearl Washington at Syracuse, again, when I was there, was just so iconic. Patrick Ewing at Georgetown,
Yeah,
just unbelievable presence. And
Phi Slamma Jamma, they would have gotten some stuff too, and they're number one again. It's crazy. Houston number
how
one.
about the Running Rebels from UNLV?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that Fab Five. Those are. It would be interesting to see what they would have gotten,
Right.
and would have set. I mean, if it would have started then, imagine what it would have been out of control now with the payments. Like what
Yeah.
the bar would have been set. We're gonna let you out of the Wolff Den with the same question everyone gets. You get to spend a day with anyone in the world. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who would you choose, and what would you like to do?
Oh, no question. For me, it'd be LeBron James because I think he's just brilliant on the court and off the court. And I would love to learn how he executed his vision to become, arguably one of the most influential athletes in the world.
Yeah, beloved and hated all at the same time. Does he use his platform as good as he should? I mean, he gets a lot of flack. He kind of cherry picks. Is that
He picked on Jerry Jones last week, but no one asked him about China either. So
I know that's what no, it's interesting. It's hard you can't look. You can't be on the right side of everything, and we're all hypocrites. There's just stuff we don't want to know about sometimes, but I don't think he's ever been picked. 250. That's a great pick. Would you play hoops with him? What else would you do?
I would just talk about business. That's what I'd be interested in.
Did you like his Space Jam movie?
I actually did the uniforms for it in my previous company, so I know a little bit about it. But no, I was not a big fan, to be fair.
Yeah, it wasn't great. All right. Well, we'll check out the playersnil.com. If you're involved in college athletics, if you have a child who's going to be in college athletics, or if you just want to educate yourself more about it, I think there's value to just being a fan and knowing more about what's going on and not just listening to Twitter talk. Check out the playersnil.com. Mark, great to have you on here. Always good to talk about college athletics and sports, and we'll probably have you on next year as the regulations and rules get a little bit more clear and transparent, and we'll see where you guys are at then.
Love it. Love chopping up with you, Matt. Good luck with you, and happy holidays to everyone in the audience.
Yeah, same. We're back in Florida next week with some more episodes, and we'll talk to you soon. Stay safe. Have a great day. Have a great night.
Thank you.